Hello everyone, welcome to another video. In this video, we are actually going to look at how to approach your HKICPA Module 13 Business Assurance exam. It's one of the most difficult exams. Students usually find this exam very difficult. So in this video, we will look at how you can approach the exam in order to get a pass in your HKICPA Module 13 Business Assurance exam. So first, I would like to briefly talk about the basic exam structure and the format, even though you may know what the exam is consist of and what is the exam structure and its format. But it's important to understand how exam is structured. It's part of the basic understanding when you're attempting any exam. So basically, you would have two sections, Section A and Section B. Both of them, the marks are divided 50-50. So 50 marks for Section A and 50 marks for Section B. Section A includes a one long case study exam, right? So it's like a huge, it would be a, it's a straight case study. It's a long case study, and you would have questions from that case study, very relevant case study. Whereas Section B, you would have several short case studies, right? So all the questions will be independent, right? So let's say Section A has 3 questions and Section B has, let's say, additional 4 questions. So those 4 questions will be independent of each other, whereas those 3 questions in Section A would actually be linked together because it's coming from the same, same case study. You have to use same case study material. This is an open book exam, as you probably know, but this does not make the exam actually very easy. It's especially the business assurance exam. Actually, open book exam is not going to help you in business assurance exam. You would have to understand it very carefully, and you need to use even if you're allowed to take books and notes, you would have to be very careful in the materials that you are using, basically, and what you pick from those materials if you're going to pick anything. But I don't think, because this exam is actually very it doesn't require a book actually, so you would have to write things on your own based on your understanding. So let's look at exam coverage. So exam coverage, basically, as we speak, it's about auditing. So some of you are already working with Big Fours, you might be doing auditing, and practical experience, as I say here, it's actually helps a lot. So practical experience will actually help you a lot. And the most important step that you might need to do is like use key terms and keywords that when you're writing your answers, you would have to use those key terms. But we will talk about how to frame your answers in the later part of this video. Let's get a basic understanding of what this exam is about, right? So exam questions will actually be mainly structured around different audit stages, right? So it's very it's about audit. So your questions will be from audit stages, right? So the question can be either from audit planning. So for example, assessing the risk of material misstatements. That's part of audit planning question. And it's a very common question. Assessing risk of material statements is a very common question on your exam. Then it can range up to audit completion, right? So for example, like what kind of audit report or what kind of audit opinion after the audit has been done, what kind of audit opinion will be issued to the company in the audit report, right? And what other duties are at the end of audit, because there are several steps that need to be completed by auditors to complete the audit. All right, so as I said in here, that students can always refer to previous exams actually. So instead of reading your learning packs, they are very helpful. You can take them in your exams as well, but the most important thing is understanding previous exams, understanding the answers and questions that have been asked in your previous exams. Previous exams are actually the best source for your exam preparation. You can do your past papers multiple times, 10 times, 15 times, maybe I'm exaggerating, but you will learn every time. You may not learn something at your first reading, but when you do the second reading, you will probably look at from a different perspective, from a different angle, and that will actually open your eyes. So you would have to actually do past papers very, very often. Let's look at potential pitfalls. So I have written down 4 potential pitfalls where there's a possibility that you might not be doing any one of these, and it's maybe probably the cause of exam failure, right? So these are, you might find them very general, but to be honest, people miss them. But it is what it is, right? So potential pitfalls, you can see reading haphazardly, time management, answer irrelevancy, and the jargon. So as I said, because there is a time pressure, students will actually read the question as fast as they can, and they will end up misunderstanding the question, right? So that's very common. So you would read something very fast, and then you would just end up understanding based on your prior knowledge, right? So what you think the question should be, and your brain will tell you, okay, this is your question, right? So you need to understand yourself and your brain workings as well when you are attempting questions or exams, CPA exams, right? So you would have to take time to understand what the question is asking. It's very important in any part of the exam, especially in business assurance, because this exam is more about English as well, right? So you would have to understand what the question is asking, and don't answer irrelevant, right? So that's basically answer irrelevancy. So time management is, of course, there's less time compared to the number of questions that you need to do. So of course, time management is very important, and that can only come from practice. So you would have to practice as much as you can from your past exams, and then it will actually improve your time management over time. So answer irrelevancy and writing haphazardly, right? So of course, so you see all these points are very, very linked, right? So because there's time concern, there's not enough time. You either read the question very fast, you either write very fast. Writing fast is okay as long as you are writing relevant. But if you're writing very fast with irrelevancy, it's not going to help, right? And for example, copy. So that's why I said open book exam. And if you just blindly quote from your notes, you just copy paste your answers, you are not going to pass. As simple as that. It's not going to work out. It's a disaster. It's a disaster recipe. So you would have to understand the question, and then you can actually pick up those important relevant points from your open book notes, and then just tweak it a little bit, make it relevant to case study. That's very important. You would have to apply your understanding to the case study. That's what QP examiners are looking for, right? And use appropriate language, relevant language. You would have to use jargon. What is, the key terms in your business assurance learning packs, so you would have to, if you use those appropriate key terms, it's much more, your answer looks actually much more relevant as well, right? So these could be, potential pitfalls that you could try to practice on and try to avoid while preparing for the business assurance exam. So let's look at how you can improve the success rate of on this exam. So basically, there are 7 points in here that I have listed down, so that you can actually, you might be doing them already, which is actually very good. But if not, then you can consider adopting a few of them. So remembering pitfalls mentioned above that we discussed earlier. All right, so those pitfalls are very important. They will actually help you understand how to approach the exam, and in order to avoid any potential mistakes, right? So practicing to write relevant audit procedures. This exam actually will ask you a lot of audit procedures. So you need to understand how to write those audit procedures, right? So this is a very crucial component, because the exam is going to ask you what audit procedures, several different audit procedures at different levels. Audit procedures can come at audit planning level, audit procedures can come at audit completion level, and they will be throughout the audit, right? So audit procedures are very important. As I said, time practice sessions are very important. You can do a few of the time practice sessions and see like how you are performing, how you are trying to approach the question. I know, doing the exam at home is different than compared to doing the exam in the exam hall, because you're surrounded by students. There's much more pressure. There's a peer pressure as well. So you would have to actually factor those things as well at the same time. I would suggest that you should at least take 15 to 20 minutes to understand and read through the whole exam, section A and section B. Try to see what questions you can answer and what questions you understand right away, and attempt those easy questions first. So the bullet point 5, basically it says you should attempt those questions where you know the answers, right? So it will boost your confidence. It will keep your nerves calm. You won't be panicked. you won't be panicking in the exam, which is very important, because if you panic, once you panic, it's possible that you screw up in the exam because of panic. All right, so these things can actually happen, and take good time to read the question, and then you need to plan your answer accordingly, because it's a writing exam as well. So just don't start writing immediately. What comes to your brain, don't start writing that. Just write it down somewhere and then try to organize that appropriately. And as I said, you can actually do this. Right? It's just that it will take practice. So that's why these exams are not easy. These exams are of course tough, and they are made tough because you need to be trained for that. As I said, reading question carefully, highlighting the keywords, so you need to understand that jargon, because the jargon actually means something. It has a meaning. It's not normal English, right? So you would have to understand that too. Then referring to notes is definitely helpful, but do not copy paste. As I said, every case study is unique and different every time. So you cannot actually, you cannot just copy paste from your past exams. You need a tailored approach. You need to tailor your answers according to what case study is talking about. Relevancy matters in this case, very much. Relevancy actually matters a lot in this case. So you need to understand what material is relevant from your open books notes for the case study that you have in the exam, right? So that's very important. So as I said, these are all just a disclaimer here that these are just my personal helpful points that I found personally. I found them helpful to stay focused and calm my nerves to get a pass on this exam. So that's what I did, personally speaking. But then again, it could vary from person to person. So you can actually tailor this. Again, as I said, different people would take things very differently. But I hope some of the points could be helpful to you. Here, these are like commonly tested areas. Right, so identification of risk of material misstatements, they could be at financial level or assertion level, right? So this is the jargon that I'm talking about. So I'm not going to explain what do we mean by at financial level and assertion level, because I would assume that if you're preparing for this, what do we mean by financial level and assertion level, and risk of material misstatements at financial level and an assertion level, right? So this is the jargon that I'm talking about. Audit procedures, as I said, could be from audit planning to audit completion, audit procedures for inventory, accounts receivable. And if you look at it, these are line items of balance sheet, right? So the question could also might ask you, like, what are the audit procedures for footnotes, right? So there are always notes in the financial statements that auditors prepare. So there could be a question on that, like what would be the audit procedures to audit the notes in order to make sure that the notes are disclosed appropriately and correctly. Then internal controls is again a very important key term. There are control questions as well. Test of controls is something very important, right? So auditors can either rely on test of controls or cannot rely on test of controls, depending upon what audit evidence is available, right? So there could be, the question could also ask what kind of audit evidence is needed, or the procedures for audit evidence as well. Then IT is actually very important these days, IT audit. Then again, these are like two other key terms: general controls and application controls. Independence, threats, and ethics are, of course, there is a must question on these two topics. You would always see. So these are actually very common topics that are going to be tested, and you will see questions on your exam from these topics. Let's look at an example here on how to actually approach, let's say, this example question. I won't be discussing the answer to this exam question, to this sample question, but you can try to follow how to break this question, right? How to understand this question. What are the different variables that you can look for in these questions, right? So the company name is Drink Limited, an energy drink manufacturing company. This is actually part of it. Part of it is important, right? It's an energy drink manufacturing company. It's not a soda company or an alcoholic company. It is a beverage company, but it's producing energy drinks, and it's a manufacturing. It's not supplying, but it's manufacturing drink, right? So that's one variable which is important to understand about the company. They have a production facility. Okay, so they produce, as we see, as the word says, manufacturing, right? And it's based in new territories, right? So that is based in new territories. Okay. So that's based in new territories. The company recently purchased a special drink formula, right? So they purchased this special drink formula. So here we are actually talking about patent, intangible assets, right? So you identify what this is. So this is an intangible asset, and this was bought from another beverage manufacturing company based in Vietnam, right? So the company is based in HK, but it buys formula from a company in Vietnam, right? So it's an international transaction, right? So international transaction will pose its own limitations and exposures. For example, foreign currency risk exchange. That's one thing that auditors will be concerned about, and they should be, right? So they have mentioned. So the question mentions the price of the purchase, which is important, to produce new energy drink, right? So the formula was purchased for the purpose of purchasing this formula is to produce new energy drink. Maybe introduce a new energy drink from Vietnam to Hong Kong. That could be one potential theory behind that, right? The purchase of the formula was appropriately recorded in accordance with the relevant accounting standard, right? So it tells you, the question tells you, fine, the company actually recorded the purchase of this intangible assets appropriately following the accounting standard. That's okay. You don't need to investigate that. The question actually states that. So you are not going to write audit procedures on, checking on company whether they are following actual, you might run some audit procedures behind that. Of course, it's important, but you probably won't get into detail. And reported at the year end in the statement of financial position. So this was mentioned in the financial position, it showed. But of course, you need to understand, the requirements. They say it was appropriately recorded. So look at the question. The question says it was appropriately recorded in accordance with relevant accounting standards. So company has recorded it, but now as an auditor, you need to make sure that they have followed the accounting standard, right? So following accounting standard is a different question itself. Following accounting standard, right? So you need to make sure that the company who has recorded this intangible asset has done so appropriately. Following the accounting standards, you need to check those requirements for intangible assets, right? So it's very important. The question is asking proposed audit procedures to audit the newly purchased special drink formula, right? So you need to suggest some audit procedures on how auditors will actually audit this transaction. So purchase. So this newly purchased special drink is a transaction. It's a financial transaction, right? It's a financial transaction between two parties. So you would have to understand, as an auditor, you would have to make sure that, this is an actual transaction, right? So that is about, that the company is not doing any fraud or something, right? So there's this very specific name of this assertion. I'm not going to tell you because it's, it should be you should be very quick on that. But it's an assertion, right? So you should not be committing fraud over there. The company should not be committing fraud, right? So let's look at, let's briefly look at how would you plan and think about your answer. I talked about different variables when you were reading the question, right? So reading the question requirement first and looking at the keywords or phrases, that is audit procedures for purchase of a drink formula, right? So that's the keyword. That's what the question is asking. Then reading the text and search for relevant facts and ask yourself relevant questions, right? So you need to have a spectacle mind, as they say, and it's in the auditing standards that as an auditor you should exercise professional skepticism and you should be independent at the same time, right? So you would have to question things, and if you don't question, how are you going to find answers, right? So you would have to question things, and the questions should be relevant. So for example, which accounting standard will be applicable to the purchase of a special drink formula, right? So if you look at it, the question did not say which standard the company is using. So you can actually, in your answer, you can state that the company should be following XYZ standard. You should know that too from your financial reporting exam. And the company has, whether the company has done appropriate recording of that, whether it's an intangible or intangible asset, that's very clear. It's an intangible asset. You can actually tell that. If tangible or intangible, how you as an auditor can verify existence of the formula. So that's one assertion only. That's just one assertion, right? So the question doesn't doesn't specifically state that which audit procedures for existence of the purchase of firm. That could be the question, but the question is very general. It's talking about audit procedures, right? So you can check for existence, you can check whether the company has rights and obligations over it, you can check whether company has recorded it accurately or not, and that the name of that assertion is accuracy, right? So you would actually suggest different audit procedures for different assertions. Is the examiner testing for a specific audit assertion, right? So as I said, this is what I was talking about earlier, right? So all of these questions, and this actually demonstrates your understanding and helps in answering the question, right? So the next step, after you have done all of this analysis, the next step is you lay down the points and plan out your answer appropriately. Just stay relevant. You can actually find audit procedures in your learning pack for existence, rights and obligations, accuracy, completeness, occurrence, right? So all of these you can find audit procedures for all of these, but they're not relevant. So you would have to make relevant. That's the whole point, and relevant using the appropriate jargon. So that's actually the whole point. So, and as I said, I'm not going to discuss the answer of this question, but it is just a thoughtful or an approach that you can take to answer these questions for your business assurance exam. Right. So as I said earlier as well, and I would just reiterate that this exam is difficult. This exam is difficult because you have to do a lot of writing. There's not much of maths involved in here. Some of analytical procedures, of course, but you would have to do a lot of writing. So a lot of practice, a lot of writing practice, a lot of practice to train your brain in order to understand the key accounting terms, key audit terms as well at the same time. So all of these things will actually play a big role to get a pass in your exam. So I hope you find this video very helpful, and if you did, please don't forget to share with your friends who are doing HKICPA exams or any other audit exams, and hopefully you can subscribe to my channel for more videos like these. And if you would like to have this file for your own record, feel free to email me. And thank you very much for watching this video.